Guess what? We're back.
You missed us.
It's Pastor Joseph and Pastor Jerry here. You are listening to Anchored and Devoted.
Anchored and Devoted, season 2.
Awesome. We're jumping back in to continue our discussion, general on bioethics, specifically on CRISPR technology and gene editing therapies in general.
Yay!
We left off this conversation discussing, at least Dave's position. Dave's good with some gene editing, but the question in front of us. Okay. You can correct it. You're here.
That's a big open door there. All
right. I said good with some. That's a limited door, okay. Even if not specified.
Okay. I'll behave.
All right. But we also, we didn't jump into how does this affect the generations to come?
Right.
And it's kind of where we're picking up today. Full disclosure. So I have a genetic condition that I've passed to 2 of my kids. I got it from my mom. My girls, when they have kids, are going to have their own conversation with their spouse about how to deal with this issue, wherever medical technology is at that time, if we're still here.
And then my disclosure, diagnosed with a blood cancer that has been caught early enough, but can be treated with gene editing. Difference in gene editing that we talked about last time is long-term versus short-term. We talked about that a little bit as far as
permanent versus transient.
Correct. So anything that I would be given wouldn't be transient at all. It would be just for me. There's no passing it on to anyone in any way. It's just in my it would be in my body to help it fight back against the parts of my gene that are broken or causing issues.
In other words, it's not something that your kids could inherit.
Correct. Yeah, but that is part of our conversation in general.
That's a big part, because in my case,
your family,
my kids did. Yeah,
there's something that has been passed on biblically. Is there a good reason to correct this? Now, I don't think we discussed this last time because we were kind of focused on more background stuff, but I know one of my conversations with individuals is two-sided or double-sided. One is, are we pushing for an environment where there's no disabilities, no sicknesses, because it is easier upon us as an individual, not even the other person who is getting better, but the fact that if, example, in your family, there's no issues, then we don't have to figure out who's going to care for you, right? Or who's going to help you. I have a parishioner, a member of the church who had cancer many years ago. I bumped into him getting some lab work done, and he had someone that was driving him around to care for him. And so all those jobs, as far as caring, as well as the individual time, wouldn't be needed if I can get rid of this. And so now that time and energy can be used for something else. Is that the focus or the reason for pushing or promoting that? And then on the flip side, will we care less about people if we aren't recognizing that we're flawed? And it has nothing to do with the health issue. It's just that this is the surface issue to help us see our brokenness of heart. If I can do, and we talked about this last time, special genes for my son, so that he's super athletic and has wings and has gills, and he's, Mr. Olympian. Is that for him? Who is what am I doing? Who is this for? As the pastor of Care at Grace, there is a lot of beautiful time that is given when one is allowed to care for another. I have an individual who I'm thinking of. His wife has Alzheimer's, we don't want it for anyone. And yet he is being stressed beyond what he believed he could do to love his wife well now. And I don't believe that, as scripture teaches, God would do this out of malice or out of a trial. And it's like he hasn't done anything. We can't gather that the wife has done anything. So this isn't a sin issue. We see in the New Testament where sometimes that is an issue, but this isn't. This is a sin issue as far as brokenness of the world. This is a sin issue as far as, longing for the new body and a new home. As pilgrims, are we trying to make this home?
I have a couple questions. Mm-hmm. This all raises for me as well. I think we put our questions out there and decide how we're going to move forward with this. What's the determination? What's the basis of determination for making a change like this? Is it a pragmatic thing? Is it a utilitarian thing? Is it just the ends justify the means? As long as a person is better, then making a change like this that is inheritable, that will affect generations to come, well, the ends justify it.
Correct.
And this goes back to, is it just Machiavellian? Or is this really, I think what you're asking here, are we trying to perfect ourselves? And if so, is that given to us as a sphere in which we are to operate? Mm-hmm. Is it right that we would try to perfect ourselves? Is it right that we would try to improve ourselves with the goal of being to perfection? Is that the domain that God's given to us?
Are you trying to make earth heaven? We've always looked and from fairy tales and whatnot for the eternal life or eternal youth, as the books would say it, through a spring somewhere in the Amazon or some other jungle that clearly has a whole bunch of gold next to it because money needs to come with the eternal life.
Naturally.
At least that's how it works in the movies. Are we trying to make this something that it's not called to be? And
then the last question, not the last, but one of the questions that follows that is, who has the right to make that decision? Do I have the right to make that decision for my child? Do I have the right to make the decision for my grandchild? Do I have the right to make a decision for your grandchild?
Mm. And that's true, because if our grandkids got married, then you would have made that choice.
Mm-hmm.
Like it had been inherited, this choice to make things different. Now, like with your health stuff, I don't want, and we've talked about this, many, many years ago, as well as even more recently, I would not want blindness for what I consider my godchildren, like ever. Right? But that's me, selfish me. Right? That's really selfish me.
We have talked about this because I don't want it for them either.
Right. Like
and yet I know that one of the things that God has used most in my life to help me to see and to know Him is the loss of my vision. He's worked through that in ways that He hasn't worked through practically anything else, save possibly my wife, my marriage.
Right now, we're doing a study of the church-owned money. This is just a little rabbit trail. We're looking at scriptures that focus on how there's a good side and a bad side to money, and how money into itself is an evil. It's the love of money.
Right.
That is the problem. And just how much it holds your heart, and how often Jesus spoke more about it more than heaven or hell. Like he was really trying to get at, especially with the rich young ruler, the understanding that it isn't about legalism. It's about love and letting go of those things that you hold near and dear. And we're wrestling right now with, is control that thing that we hold near and dear, right? Because we talked about before, like, is this a money thing as far as being able to, who can afford what? But now, is this just a control thing? Is this something where I am able to determine, in my perspective, my longevity, which is funny because you still could get hit by a bus or lightning or so many other things. And yet it's control in one area and you still don't realize you don't have control. Like, even
see, that's something that is missed when we are on the bleeding edge of technology. We make the assumption that because we have taken technology as far as it has ever come, and it's so far beyond where it has ever been before, that therefore our understanding is sufficient to call this good in a forward trajectory without any questions. To say, no, this is, there's no reason that we ought to halt this because this is so far advanced and the smartest minds have come up with this that it can only be good. That's a very dangerous point of hubris, because where I am is, if there were a gene therapy that could cut out the gene that I pass to my kids from them so that they don't pass on to their kids, I'm not comfortable doing that, because I don't know what the long-term benefits, and I don't know, more importantly, what the long-term consequences of that action are. And when we talk about long-term consequences, I'm not talking about in the lifetime of one person.
Correct.
I'm talking about 300 generations later. The problem with working with genetic material is it's biological. That means it's breaking down. It falls prey to the law of entropy. It's going to break down. And by making an elision somewhere in a gene, by changing a gene somewhere, the possibility that change is going to have a larger negative impact in the future than not doing that will have in the same future is impossible to know. To state, well, it's not going to happen because obviously we're making this better, it's making an argument from darkness. It's making an argument from nothing, from silence is what I'm looking for there. And I'm just not comfortable with that. Secondarily, I know who it is who made me. I know that he formed me in my mother's womb. I know that he's numbered all of my days. I don't have this drive to go and find a fountain of youth, because I know that he's written down every day that exists for me in his book. And he's going to see me through to them. I don't need to try to, I don't recommend this series, but there's a series where dead people get sent up to a cyberspace area.
I know which one you're talking about.
Don't watch it.
It's not worth your time.
It's not worth your time at all. But the idea that our consciousness should be held on to, it should go on forever and ever. I'm not here. I think the one thing that this show does do well is it contrasts this possibility with the possibility of heaven. And the draw is to say, well, obviously heaven's fake, but this is real because we computerized and digitized your soul, your personality, and it now exists here in this horrible, horrible dystopian place. Do I trust God? But the third thing is, when we talk about gene editing, it's impossible to not talk about eugenics. And to be very blunt about eugenics is at its core, it will necessarily become a racist tool of complete domination.
It's natural to understand people will look at culture and say, how can I get rid of the things that are not, that I'm not happy with?
Yes.
And
there are times and spaces where those things in culture were you.
Well, I was about to say some of those things are also things that were done against others that look like me. And so you'd have individuals go into the doctor for a broken leg and learn that they're sterilized, which is wild. You'd have,
Yes.
Individuals tested upon just for the furtherance of understanding, because they're viewed as less than now, with the knowledge that I can change the future. When we place ourselves in the space of God, when we are choosing to devalue others because we personally have an issue, it shows us that we personally have an issue because God is fine. and know that when we have people in places of power and they have issues, that is then seen in the way they work. And so when you talk about, eugenics not being a fan of Black people, yeah, I get that. I get that completely. You can just look at history and see that there are certain things that are viewed as better than. I would disagree, but that was how they were viewed. I think and hope that we're at a place where we can at least sit down and realize that those old thoughts are no longer true. But I do know when fear kicks in, we often revert to the narratives of our past.
Yeah, but see, those old thoughts were never true. That's the thing.
I know.
They weren't given credence because they were true. They were given credence because they were a means to an end.
Again, but if this is something that I've heard in my family, this is part of my story, this is part of my community, and that's hard to reconcile with the truth when that truth is coming from someone who's other.
I agree. Yeah, it is.
Like it's just hard. There's the expectation as you look at different countries working with gene editing that each country will be looking to model the perfect citizen. And that isn't simply beauty. This is from a perfect citizen, someone who works well and is good and quiet. That is quite concerning. To know that we have to be in the room for those conversations because, as you stated, the switch or the snip that takes place might not even be labeled as such. It could be something that is viewed as, I don't know, and we're removing it. And it has greater impacts than we can imagine. I know for myself, when I went and sat down with the doctor, they could tell me the chromosomes that were broken, but they couldn't tell me what they did. Which is wild. Like, how can you tell me that these are the broken ones? You can see it on the blood work. These are the broken ones. You've done your biopsies and other stuff, and yet you can't tell me what they do. We haven't gotten that far yet.
No,
but you can fix them, but you can't tell me what they do. How can you fix it if you can't tell me what it does? Like that's mind-boggling, but to know that that's where we are. And often when we walk into the place of a hospital or to talk to a doctor, we don't even think about what do they know versus what they don't know.
Well, this is where the hubris comes back in. Is one of two things will happen the smarter you get. You'll either become more aware of how much you don't know, or you'll become much, much, much less aware of how much you don't know. Right. And, to be clear, I think that there have only been, a small minority of doctors that have pursued intentionally eugenic ideas and eugenic research for the purpose of purifying the gene pool of people. But that's kind of like saying, well, there's only a few people who use guns
Exactly.
to kill people. Okay, but they're still destructive in and of themselves. When used the way they're supposed to be used, they are destructive. Whether you're destroying a target or an animal or a door or a person, they're destructive. That's what they do. It's in their nature.
Well, this is one that's even worse than a bullet, because now you're talking about, again, if we're doing what we're supposed to, sharing the gospel, sending missionaries, we're winning people to Christ, and again, they've already had these changes put upon them to pass on, there isn't a conversation about it. And so this is...
Well, that's one of the things that really concerns me, is that eventually, and you were alluding to this, and you might even be going there now, but eventually, whether or not I impose a betterment on myself has no bearing on whether or not my neighbor is going to seek to impose the betterment that he put for himself onto me as well.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what I was thinking about. This is, I think, one of the concepts that I'd like to spin up here for myself. Is it struck me as we were talking that the opposite to gratitude is entitlement.
Mm.
And that's what I see underpinning a lot of this is scientifically, I'm entitled to pursue knowledge. I'm entitled to pursue advancement. As a person, I'm entitled to pursue my better health. As a nation, we are entitled to pursue better citizens. As an individual, I'm entitled to pursue amassing wealth. And if that's my guiding principle, where are the fences?
Gratitude requires humbleness. It requires an understanding that you didn't do it, that God was in charge, that others played a role in your life. That's what gratitude.
That there's something that is now mine that was not mine.
I know that gratitude, it means recognizing the teammate who gave you the assist. Gratitude, like you've scored, you've gotten the goal, but know that you didn't do it alone. And even when it comes to science, it comes to your individual health, your family, this is all stuff that has been God-given. And so we should be gracious. But as you stated, when we come with an I perspective, and I deserve, I earn, I can get it, so therefore it must be okay.
Mm-hmm.
If you come with that kind of a mindset, then the limits are dark. The passion isn't really pure anymore. It's
well, you can no longer worship, which is what it really comes down to, right?
I was going to say, and so worship to me isn't just music, and I don't think the same is true for Jared. Worship has to do with our work, our play, our life, and
our focus.
In the middle of it, then you are no longer a worshiper. You are created to worship. That is our purpose. And we often miss that by getting so wrapped up in the I mindset. I need a nice car. I need a big house. I need. And need, first of all, we need to throw that out. I want. I'm envious of others because I'm not looking at God. I'm not worshiping. I'm not doing my part. And so when we look at the outward focus for CRISPR, we have to be, and I know we're not going to wrap this up today, but we have to be mindful that others are not coming with a God-centric mindset. Know that, at least for me, the way I'm taking this, gene editing doesn't affect the soul.
Agreed.
So that's not taking place. And I think that's something in the conversation that's missing. The soul is not being edited. The shell is. And so don't view this as something that we need to start a war over. I don't believe that at all. I do believe it is something we need to talk about and be intentional about, with the understanding that we bear the image of God, and we do have an opportunity to challenge the focus on the shell versus the focus on the heart. The amount of energy that we put into it, the way in which we pray, as well as the way in which we engage with others.
And that includes the way that we care for the two. And I'm not comfortable calling the body a shell, because that puts into a history of a lot.
Yeah,
that says more than what you actually mean.
Yes, I know. It's not just a husk. It's, I'll take that.
God is a God who has made us physical beings, and He values that. That's why we take care of our physical selves. But what you're saying, I completely agree with. How do we care for our soul, and how do we care for our body? Which one takes precedence? If we have to put one in front of the other, which one should take preference?
Right. I know that many people focus on their body more than they focus on their soul. And so, as you stated, which one it takes precedence, I'm concerned more for the soul than for the body. I do believe our body is a temple. And so we should take care of it. We should.
Would you say that again, Dave?
Our body is a temple of God. We have the Spirit of God living within us. So it is special. It is set apart for His use. So I was demeaning it earlier with an understanding that in perspective to the soul, not unto itself. Right. God formed man out of the dust of the earth. If it wasn't worth his time, then He would have just spoken or done something else. So He actually took the time.
Wouldn't have gotten the double good.
Exactly. He took his time to breathe into it and to value it and to die for it. And there you go.
I didn't realize. I didn't mean to just make an Orwellian statement there.
Yes.
God made things good and double good.
I got you.
All right. And on that, we'll probably talk about this more.
I'm sure we will. I don't think we're done.
No, probably not. But with that said, we'll let you guys go. Thank you for stopping by. Thank you for joining in. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this. We'd love to hear your pushback. You can reach out to us at anchoredanddevoted@gmail.com. And if you do so, we will respond to you.
Oh, and we do think prayer still works. So for those who are the prayer warriors out there who want everything to be healed just through prayer, we also believe God works through doctors and nurses as well.
And medicines.
In medicine.
And exercise.
Just for clarity, since I had to talk about the shell earlier.
And if you want to send us your prayer requests, you can send those to anchoredanddevoted@gmail.com too.
There you go. We'll be happy to pray. Okay, let's go. Have a good one. Bye-bye.